Good morning and welcome to the Killik market update. It's been a fairly good week for markets, encouraged by further negotiations between the US and China. And in fact, the Chinese market has been one of the strongest performers this year to date, currently up about 12.5% in 2019 so far. Here in the UK, however, we have had a bit of a setback this week. Yesterday, MPs voted against Theresa May's Brexit Plan B by quite a serious margin. Now, yesterday's vote was not legally binding, but it does demonstrate the lack of support that Theresa May does have from MPs. So at the moment, we've got just 6 weeks to go until the Brexit deadline of March the 29th, and having a resolution before then is looking increasingly unlikely. So it does appear that an extension to Article 50 is becoming one of the more likely options. Now, one theme that we've been looking at for quite some time now is the increase in focus on healthier living. So we feel that consumers are focusing more on their own healthcare, their own well-being and their own fitness. And something that fits in quite well with this from the current earnings season is lots of comments from the big beer companies about how they're starting to move more into non-alcoholic beer in quite a big way. And in fact, worldwide sales of non-alcoholic beer were up 38% in 2018. And lots of comments from the big companies this quarter about how they're moving more into non-alcoholic beer. Heineken, for example, has just experienced its best year of sales in a decade, and it did credit non-alcoholic beer sales for this. AB InBev, the largest beer company in the world, has just announced a new role for a chief of non-alcoholic beverages. And Diageo, the owner of Guinness, has just announced a new non-alcoholic version of Guinness. So it does feel this is a growing trend, and surely it must be helped by trends such as Dry January and Sober October. So this morning we've been having a look at the increase in Google searches for non-alcoholic beer. Here's the data since 2004. So as you can see, there has been quite a notable rise. Now, the axis on this chart shows relative numbers of searches. So if you look and see that the number was 20 back in 2004, today it's about 100. So that simply means that there has been a five-fold increase in searches for non-alcoholic beer over the last 15 years. And also on the subject of healthcare, this week we've been looking at some changes in the constituents of the US stock market over the last 200 years and trying to spot some trends. So here's a chart that shows the changes over this time period, going all the way back to the 1800s. So as you can see, initially the majority of the stock market was made up of financial companies, but today it is much more diverse. But trying to spot some trends on here, I think the one most obvious trend is the growth in the healthcare sector. So that's shown by the red section at the bottom of the chart. So we do feel that healthcare is a sector that is very well placed at the moment, and if you would like to speak to one of our investment managers about the healthcare exposure in your portfolio, please do give us a call. Other notable apparent trends on this graph would be the growth in information technology and communications. There was a bit of a blip in these two around about the time of the dot-com boom, so these companies would have spiked up quite notably and then crashed. But if you overlook that, there does still appear to be quite an upward trend in these two sectors. So that's perhaps something else to speak to our investment managers about. Now, moving on to the week ahead, we're coming towards the end of earnings season, but next week is quite a big one for UK listed banks. So we have got results coming out from Barclays, HSBC and Lloyds. That's it from us. Have a great weekend and we'll see you next Friday.